Welcome to another live broadcast from TrueFire Studios. Sean McGowan is back in the house. We just wrapped two new projects. If you're a jazzer, you are going to love both of these. We're going to give you a sneak peek at them. Sean, we've only really been working with Sean for a couple of years now, but already we have 8 projects published and 2 more in the can this week. Sean is a supreme fingerstyle jazz guitar player and an amazing instructor. In fact, associate professor of music at the guitar program at University of Colorado. Several recordings out. River Coffee won Best Independent Release of the Year. Plays festivals all over the place, and we are always thrilled when we see his name on the studio calendar. Check out that guitar, by the way. We're going to tell you all about that as well. I want one. I think you will too. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How you
Good.
doing?
I'm sorry to interrupt you right in the middle of a chorus like that.
Please.
I hate doing that, you know?
Man, it feels great to be here. It's good to see you.
It's better to introduce you while you're playing. I need to time my intros to, at least get you to the end of the chorus, but it's better than me introing you while you're sitting there listening to all those accolades, right?
All good, yeah.
Welcome back, man.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. For me, it's a little temporary escape from the winter blizzard weather of Denver.
I'll bet.
But yeah, it's always great to see you and the entire team here at TrueFire.
So you brought 2 really, really kind of interesting projects to the table. One of them I'm particularly, I can't wait to dig deep into that. The Organic Jazz Improv course.
Yeah.
Tell folks what that's all about.
Well, this is all about solving the problem that a lot of students of jazz come up with, and that is the tendency to think that jazz improv is only about scales. And then once you learn all these scales, it seems like you can be overwhelmed with the information that's out there with, well, what scale goes with what chord? And then, the more you think about that, the more deeply entrenched you get in that type of thinking, the further away you are from creativity and what I think of as organic jazz improv, which is a way of thinking that's closer to melody, closer to rhythm, closer to the elements of, you might say, old school jazz improv that was language and developed through the idea of language and phrasing and musical ideas as opposed to, an academic scale-based approach. So in this course, it's really all about kind of freeing yourself from the constraints of thinking about scales and exploring a number of different ways to make your improvisation sound, creative and more natural and more like jazz should sound, I guess is one way of saying that.
Yeah, so you bring up a really, really good point. We have a very large jazz student base here.
Yeah.
And you hear all the time about the challenge of trying to learn all your scales, learn all your arpeggios, learn all of the different voicings. And then, it gets so locked in your head when you're actually trying to improvise. It's sort of like you're trying to think it through too mechanically. Right?
Exactly.
And that's what got us very excited about this particular, curriculum that you brought to the table. But would you expand a little bit more? So, you talked about more traditional approaches to jazz as a language.
Right.
Would many of the early improvisers or some of the jazz greats that we know, were they hung up on scales and arpeggios, or were they... Well, was it more about phrases and language and less academic approaches to improv?
Right, yeah, exactly right. So based on older musicians that I've played with over the years and talked to firsthand, and also a lot of anecdotes, stories, conversations that I've had with musicians who also played with much older musicians, the short answer is no. And the key word is hung up, because you never want to, jazz is all about creative expression, and you don't ever want to feel hung up. And that's true of any style of music. So, whether you're playing blues or rock or pop, funk, jazz, doesn't matter. You just want to have this freedom and this real sensibility of like, okay, I've got some ideas and I want to communicate those musically through my instrument. So that requires a little bit of homework in the sense of knowing where the notes are, and that's part of this course, by the way. We have a system that we're using called the 5 neighborhoods of the neck, which really is a way to understand where all of these notes are, so you can utilize them, kind of based on the caged approach. If I know a lot of people are familiar with that system, so we use that as a launching point. But then we get right into like how to make a musical phrase come alive using rhythmic phrasing techniques. How do we make it come alive by embellishing chord tones with neighbor tones, substituting different chords? So there's a certain amount of theoretical knowledge, but again, in my mind, it's organic because it's serving directly the musical point. So the problem with scales, a lot of times, you go through all the trouble of learning all of these different scales, and on guitar especially, unlike the piano where there's only one fingering for a scale, right? The guitar, there's all of these different fingerings and things to deal with, and then the end result is it just sounds like you're kind of running scales over the changes, and that's what a lot of my students over the years have complained about. They're like, yeah, I've mastered all these scales and I put all this time and energy into it, but now it just sounds like I'm playing scales.
Yeah,
and how can I play more musically?
Relate to that, exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So there is that initial hurdle of figuring out, okay, how can I access all of these notes on the fretboard, and where are they? But once you get familiar with these different neighborhoods of the neck and the fretboard, then you can really start tapping into, okay, how can I create a meaningful, creative, musical line?
So let's do this. Tommy, how long is this course? It's quite extensive, right?
Yeah, it's very extensive. I mean, I think it's going to end up being over 3 hours.
Okay, so we're only going to be able to touch on, kind of the tip of the iceberg. But why don't we work with Always Greater Love?
Okay.
And if you could just give us an idea of kind of the, the general approach, and then how that approach or how the tools you're showing us would apply to a tune like that.
Right, you got it. All right, so let me think before we dive into this specific tune. I would just quickly touch on the kind of the overarching concepts of this course. So the first part of this course is just all about learning and understanding the notes on the fretboard, which in my experience over the years as a teacher, there are a lot of holes in people's knowledge of the fretboard. And, not surprisingly, this thing is a beast, but it's not insurmountable. So I think one way of really organizing the fretboard that people have discovered is using cage. So the first part of this course is just kind of like unraveling the mysteries of the fretboard. And there are a lot of exercises that are fun and enjoyable that I think hopefully will really illuminate students' ability to navigate the fretboard. So we got to just deal with this. Then we dive into rhythm, which is often overlooked when we're talking about jazz improv. People spend so much time thinking about scales or modes or playing outside or hip licks or whatever that we overlook rhythm. And that's kind of the foundation of jazz. I mean, it is the foundation of jazz as well as many other styles of music. You got to have that feeling, and that's a big part of your rhythmic phrasing. So we talk about delayed attack, creating syncopation using anticipation, how to bring a melody to life, those kinds of musical concepts. Then we deal with chord tone improvisation. So understanding a progression means understanding the chord tones in each chord. So we start off with triads and then just move to 4-part chords. So it's just 4 notes to deal with instead of 7 notes. And that also kind of takes away that overwhelming feeling of like, wow, what scale do I use? And there's all these different places. Yeah. There's just 4 notes in one neighborhood. And then we right away start with this organic idea of like, okay, let's start improvising on something that's very comfortable, very familiar, and easy. And start, being creative with that. And then after chord tones, the next section is developing neighbor tones, and that's what gives a lot of the really colorful notes that we hear in jazz, but also blues and rock and lots of different styles. But what's cool about the neighbor tone approach is that it's so solidly, connected to chord tones that once you get the chord tones happening on the neck, the neighbor tones are literally a step away. So let me just demonstrate that real quick. The first 4 chords of this tune, this particular etude is called Always Greater Love. It's based on the standard There Is No Greater Love. So if we look at this, our first 4 chords are B flat, and then we go to E flat 7, A flat 7, and then G7. Now, I just happen to play this in this particular region of the neck, or we're calling it the neighborhood. I could play that in every neighborhood. I could access those 5 cage shapes. So we can just kind of arbitrarily pick a place on the fretboard and then draw or extract lines out of those chord shapes that we all know and we've all been playing for a long time. We just didn't know maybe the potential that each one of those holds in terms of single line improv. So I'm just going to start with the first couple of lines in this etude are just basically chord tones. So over the B flat, you've got, and then right away, when you go to the E flat 7, we're going to play a chord tone of that. And it's all right there in the same neighborhood. So, you know, one of the first things that we deal with is just how to stay in the same neighborhood of the neck and address these different chord changes in an easy way without thinking, oh yeah, now I have to switch to this thing and finding a different area on the neck, and then the change is gone. It's over. So we're still staying there. And then we have this concept of A flat 7, also playing chord tones, and then down a half step to G. And then here's an example of, neighbor tone. So now we have a little bit of chromaticism in there. We're approaching the 5th by a lower neighbor below and an upper neighbor above it. So, and sometimes, I'm going to go back to the word hung up because that's a big problem. People will get so hung up on theory, they'll be like, well, wait a minute, C7, why would I play an F sharp? That doesn't work. That's not what I learned in theory class, and it doesn't matter. It's just a sound, and if you have to come up with a theory to reinforce it, then we could just call that a neighbor tone. It's a note that just kind of colors. And we're just basically surrounding these fundamental chord tones, but we're in a sense decorating them with all of these embellishments.
So let's roll the track, and
all right.
Will you play right in that neighborhood and give us a plain example of what you just taught us?
Let's hear the track. Kind of improvising there a little bit, got lost in the music, but I was just the concept of the
jazz,
it's okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea was just kind of like playing melodies using these rhythmic phrasing ideas, and then starting to embellish those melodies using these auxiliary notes, chromaticism, neighbor tones, things like that. And that's, I think, historically much more in alignment with some of the things that the classic jazz musicians, I'm thinking about people like Lester Young, for example, and of that generation, and even into the bebop players, would think along those lines. I don't think Lester Young ever thought about, well, I'm going to play Lydian dominant there. I think he just thought about like tones that would maybe, reiterate the melody or suggest the melody, mimic the melody, and then kind of decorate all of those different lines with these various chromatic embellishments. Yeah,
one of the takeaways we had on the other side of the glass there is for most of us, understand chord shapes. As guitar players, we're able to, get a grip on the chords you just showed us. And the chord tones are generally right there in the chord.
Right.
Horn players don't necessarily have that advantage, but we do.
That's right.
The way you're presenting the curriculum is very much about understanding what the chord shape is, seeing the chord tones within that shape, and then saying, hey, go this way or that way, grab a neighbor tone, and then add rhythm to it.
Yeah.
And, it's just it gets you up and running really quickly without scales, without arpeggios, without a lot of theory.
Right.
So I love that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I agree 100%, and I guess that's the word that we've been using over and over again is organic. It's just more connected to the source, which ultimately is music,
Yeah.
not a scale. So,
Let's do Bluesette. Let's do the same thing.
Yeah, let's pull this out here. So this is an etude that's based on Bluesette. It's a great piece in 3/4 by Toots Thielemans. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of these tunes, I picked these tunes for a reason. All of these etudes are based on standards that feature a lot of 2/5 movement in different keys. Mm-hmm. So it's easy in terms of, it's accessible in terms of it just being a 2/5/1. There's not a lot of heavy duty reharmonization or modern harmony or anything, but yet all of these tunes explore different tonal areas as this one does. So Bluesette is a really cool tune to play over because it goes through a lot of different 2/5/1s in different keys. So let's check this one out.
Very nice. So give us a little takeaway lesson about that tune.
So it sounds like music, but all we're doing is basically employing some of the devices that we explore throughout this course. So in this one particular area, towards the end of the song, this is kind of a cool thing. This D-flat major 7 chord. So we're basically just taking this simple arpeggio based on chord tones, 1, 3, 5, and we're embellishing that with upper and lower neighbor tones that surround each of those chord tones. So instead of just going, we can now create a line. And now you have all these little temporary colors and a little bit of tension that's created. And what's cool is when that changes to minor, you can, the next chord is D flat minor 7. You can still stay in that neighborhood and just slightly adjust it for the minor chord tone. So you can create these lines that share the same notes and in a sense create a continuity between those seemingly unrelated chords. Mm-hmm. So over that D flat major 7, we've got, and then we'll stay right there for minor. And then take that same idea and translate it or transpose it to the new key of C minor 7, F. So we're developing this ability to kind of surf over all of these unrelated changes instead of thinking, oh, C minor 7, okay, and I do that scale, and now C sharp minor 7, that's a completely different thing. We're trying to remove the thinking out of it and just surf and kind of glide over these changes.
That's the organic
That's
element.
right, yeah.
Important shout out. You have a son, right?
Yes, Eamon. Hi, Eamon.
Eamon is chimed in right now. He says, hi, Dad.
Hi, my man. You staying warm in the blizzard?
It's cold out there.
I think there was no school today in Denver. I'm not sure, but
because of the snow? Or?
Yeah. This is classic Colorado weather. Sunday it was 70 degrees, and then Monday blizzard, Tuesday blizzard, low of I think -1.
Goodness.
So that 70-degree swing.
That'll do it, right?
That'll do some damage, I think.
You also have a shout out from Hendrickson Amps.
Yeah, what's up, guys?
I think I see
There's one right
a little
here.
love right there. We'll
Yeah.
get to that at the end, so stay tuned. We're going to give a nice rundown. They sound great. I hope they'll let you leave those behind. Actually, they sound so good.
I'm going to let you take that on instant chat there. You
Okay.
can pick that up from
All
there.
right. If we do a good job presenting why you love them so much, who knows? Maybe they will, you know?
Yeah.
Let me do a little bit of housekeeping really
right.
quickly. First off, certainly want to thank everybody for chiming in. Let us know where you're tuned in from, and we'd also love to know what time it is wherever you happen to be. It always fascinates me. It's the middle of the night. It's breakfast for some folks.
Right.
So please let us know where you're tuned in from. We'll shout back to you. Also, underneath the video, there's a promo code, Sean Live. It's good for 25% off. Either the 2 courses we're previewing for you today, or any of the 8 courses already in the library, and there's some really good stuff in there.
That's awesome.
So you got 48 hours to take advantage of that. That's underneath the video. Also underneath the video is a trivia question. Now, please don't answer this question in the live chat, which happens frequently, which is why I say this every time, because then you give away the answer to everybody. But if you click on the link, answer this question, you'll be entered in a random drawing at the end of the broadcast, and we'll give you, or the winner, a $100 TrueFire gift card. So here's the question. What influential jazz pianist and composer served as the inspiration for Sean's 3rd acclaimed solo guitar recording? Again, what influential jazz pianist and composer, actually one of my heroes, I got to see him live at the Village Vanguard.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many times. Served as the inspiration for Sean's 3rd acclaimed solo guitar recording. Click that link, answer it there. Don't answer it in the chat, and you're entered in the drawing. All right, man. So I wanted to make another kind of student perspective observation on your teaching, right?
Yep.
Like, it's exactly what you said, how students, we get really hung up on scales and arpeggios, and then we're running those scales and we're not making them musical. I think what's really cool about your organic system here is it's not scales or arpeggio, even though an arpeggio are the chord tones. It's kind of, you're identifying, here's the tones within this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so there's no risk of running, arpeggios, right?
Right.
That's what made it, I think, for us very organic, because you're just giving us like a palette of notes to choose from. Mm-hmm. You're saying it's okay to go to either side and find a neighbor tone. There's some cool common tones, and the rest is up to your creativity. And I think this is a really breakthrough, jazz teaching system. It's really killer, and I believe a lot of our students are going to dig it, especially the. We have a lot of blues students who want to jazz up their blues.
Yeah.
I think this would be very, very helpful for them
definitely.
as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the language that we're covering in this course, you'll find in the playing of people that kind of lived in both worlds, early blues and early jazz. I'm thinking about the great Texas guitarist Oscar Moore, T-Bone Walker, certainly, and, Otis Rush, a lot of these, B.B. King even, they would just kind of embellish their phrases. But, one thing that you mentioned that really hit home with me is that, I love jazz music. I love all styles of music, but jazz is all about feeling good. It was originally, it's like dance music. It's celebratory music, not necessarily cerebral music. That came later. But unfortunately, a lot of times people get all worked up. It's like, hey, let's play a blues. Cool, that's fun. But then immediately is, do you play any jazz? Then, people get all uptight and they're like,
Right.
oh, geez, I don't know. And it's hard, and it has this inherent suggestion of something that's like really arduous and not coming from the heart or coming from the soul. And, part of one of my missions in teaching some of this language, and also as a student, as a lifelong student, and learning this, is like, hey, let's figure out a way to make this accessible so that we can play it in an organic way, so that it's creative and fun, because ultimately we need to serve the music, and the music shouldn't sound hard. In fact, that's a Joe Pass quote. Joe Pass said, music jazz shouldn't sound like it's hard, you know?
Yeah.
And whenever you see videos of Joe Pass playing and Wes Montgomery, and I think most of the greats, they make it look so easy. It's just effortless, and it's this joyful experience. So, yeah, part of my mission as a teacher is kind of breaking down those barriers.
Well, you're definitely succeeding, man. And, you know, you mentioned before, I just want to let folks know this course, you know, it is really well constructed. And we're playing some of the performance studies, which are the last section of the course where you're putting the principles together. But we have the first section. Sean covers all of the neighborhoods, kind of explains that caged foundation, takes you through neighborhoods for major, minor, major seventh, dom seventh, and minor seventh. That gives you the tools to be able to stay in a position in any one of these neighborhoods and solo over changes.
That's right.
Another big rite of passage for aspiring jazz players is how the heck do you play over changes and not move all around and chase your bar chords, you know?
Right.
Then in the second section, love this section, man, like musical lines. That's and you talk about lower neighbor tones, upper tones, minor seventh neighbors, 2, 5, 1 upper and lower neighbors. And in fact, take 2 seconds and explain how commonplace, just like if you're playing the blues, a 1-4 or a 5-4-1 is we all know that, right?
Yeah.
But in jazz, 2-5-1s are very common, right?
Right, that's right.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really kind of just a step away from what you're used to playing. If you're used to working with 4-5-1 or even just 5-1, we're just adding another chord at the front end. And, it is indeed a ubiquitous, progression all through jazz standards and American classic standards. But one of the ideas that we explore in this is that you take a particular region of the neck or position or whatever you want to call it. We call it a neighborhood in this class. And then, all of these shapes are there and readily available. So if I'm in the key of C, just kind of landed on that, and I just happen to use this G shape coming from a G chord, and we talk about that. We break that all down in the course. But I've got my D minor 7 chord is here. My G7 is here. There's my 5. And then here's my 1, C. So if I were to kind of melt those notes down into individual chord tones, we have D minor 7, the notes of G7, and then resolve that to C.
All in position.
All in the same. I didn't even
neighborhood.
leave that neighborhood right there.
Right.
So what we do is we kind of, there's a bunch of exercises and ways to really master each of the neighborhoods. But, one of the analogies that I think about is, so we're here in beautiful St. Pete. Now, this isn't a city that I know very well at all. It's kind of, we have the tendency, if we're in a new town or an unfamiliar neighborhood, we kind of use the same route to go in there. And I'm now talking about the days before Siri and phones,
Right,
especially,
of
right?
course.
But it's like, okay, I've got my way to TrueFire, and I have my one way to the coffee shop, right? And then all of a sudden, for one reason or another, you might find a different way that connects those two neighborhoods. And you're like, I had no idea that TrueFire was so close to that coffee shop because it takes me 10 minutes this way and 10 minutes that way. And that analogy holds true on the guitar because it's like, wow, I had no idea. I'm really comfortable in this shape, but in this one, it's totally gray area. I had no idea the connections. So the first wall that we break down in this course is just connecting all of those neighborhoods, getting to know one neighborhood at a time, and then putting them all together.
Which is in the first section. And, frankly, I think that section alone's kind of worth the price of admission. A lot of people, Sean, a lot of students, and look, myself included until somebody opened my eyes to it, thought of the cage system, which is a unique, guitaristic, incredible thing, right? A big epiphany. But they think that that's more about just chords. But the truth of the matter is, as you illustrate here, it's your key to also soloing and improvising over changes and staying in position and not chasing things all up and down the neck.
Yeah.
So, even if you're not a jazz player or have no aspirations to be a jazz player, a lot of the in fact, all of the information you're giving here applies to any style of music, right? You could take an organic approach to improvising over blues, more sophisticated blues changes, rock, pop, whatever. Right?
Absolutely. If you're a blues player and you're playing a tune like Stormy Monday Blues,
Yep.
that's a song that has some chord changes in it,
Yep.
right? Or even if you're playing a Pink Floyd tune, doesn't matter. A lot of these songs have maybe like chromatic moves, where you have this kind of
Right.
little wing, right? And then you've always, as a guitar player, maybe you've heard a saxophonist solo over that, or a pianist or a jazz musician, and kind of long for that, like, wow, I wish I could really navigate those changes instead of just kind of being stuck in my one little box, pentatonic pattern or blues scale, whatever. And I think thinking in this way, Cage is just an organizational system. It's a way of unlocking the fretboard. There's no, musical value in the sense that it's not going to show you how to be creative or play with better time feel or any of that. It's just a way of organizing the neck. But once you deal with the notes on the neck, this is a guitaristic thing, and every player has to deal with learning the notes on their instrument.
Right.
And on some instruments it's easier, like piano. That's it. There's only one place for that one note. But on guitar there are several. So Caged is a great way, one of many great ways to open up the fretboard and understand where the notes are.
I almost wish we didn't have to categorize this as a jazz course because, it opens up the door really to all of the things you're talking about.
Sure.
For any style of music.
Yeah.
But we'll stick to jazz, okay? We're going to call it, it is the organic jazz improv playbook. So, all right, let's do another. How about Tune It?
All right, let me pull this up here. So this is an etude based on Tune Up by Miles Davis. And, this was written basically as a warm-up tune. It's an etude. And this one features it demonstrates this concept of neighbor tones, creating colors with neighbor tones, and then also a lot of the rhythmic phrasing concepts that we talk about at the beginning of the course, how to, sequence ideas and make them come to life with various rhythms. So yeah, let's check this out.
Give us a takeaway, one of the tools you were using there.
Yeah, so one of the tools in this, when you have a lot of 2/5s that are moving through different keys, is just taking an idea and then not abandoning that, but actually sequencing it, or meaning directly repeating that in a new area of the neck, a new neighborhood, and it's the same shapes, same fingering sometimes even, or elaborating on that. Maybe you'll take a question and answer type of phrase. So I could take one idea, such as this, and then maybe sequence that, so start it off the same. And then just finish off the phrase in a different way. Maybe the first time the answer will go up with the notes. Maybe the second time it'll go down. Or maybe there'll just be a rhythmic variation. So all throughout this course, we're constantly addressing these larger musical concepts of like, hey, how can we make our solos more musical by adding in some of these ideas that correspond or correlate to language, right? Let's take a question and then repeat it. Like blues, right? Blues, the whole form of a 12-bar blues is, you state a question and then you restate that question and then the punchline is all at the end. So kind of thinking about those concepts when you create a solo is also another way to make your solo a little bit more organic and creative and musical sounding.
So there throughout the course, there's lots of not just organic and navigational type and understanding neighborhoods, but there's a lot of insightful creative approaches that you can employ without necessarily having blazing speed, but still have a great jazz sound.
Yes, definitely. Of course, you don't have to have blazing speed to play convincing music. Yeah, I think that's all on a deeper level. You mentioned insightful. It's like the surface level is like, okay, let's deal with Cage, let's deal with how to unlock these notes, and let's very specifically and very intentionally address some of these rhythmic concepts. But the larger picture on a deeper level are these musical concepts, dealing with form and how to come up with phrasing that makes sense. So, you're actually saying something.
Yeah. Let's do some shout outs to fans you have all over the globe, not just in Colorado. It's not just your son. Someone chimed in, said it was like 17 degrees home. You got out just in time.
Oh, man, yeah.
But you've got, fans from the Netherlands, England, Russia, Rolette, Texas, Las Vegas, Ontario, Rio de Janeiro, Venice, France, Black Forest, Germany, Hanover, Germany, Friedrichshafen, Germany. I'm sorry if I pronounced that badly. Arkansas, Florida, Galesburg, Michigan, Paris, Poland, Moldova, Minneapolis, Ohio, Quebec, Utah, Fort Collins. That's kind of near you. Elkhart, Indiana, Rome, Italy, Sofia, Bulgaria. Andrian, who is one of the co-founding partners here, is from Sofia, Finland, and Scotland. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, it's beautiful.
All over the place.
For a minute there, it sounded like we were composing additional lines to get your kicks on Route 66.
I know, man. Well, Route
Moldavia,
66 just
Minneapolis.
extended around the globe in every time zone. So I have a question, but we're going to, in the next segment, we're going to talk about the Fingerstyle Jazz course. So if anybody has any questions related to the organic jazz improv course, that we just ask them now and we'll answer them now. But in the meantime, Ice Pick Licks wants to know, are there common phrases used in jazz like there are in blues? He really wants to use some jazzy phrases in his own playing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's licks and things that are at home in jazz, just like they are in blues. And a lot of that comes from listening, listening to recordings and then listening to live music, going out and catching it, and then understanding that phrase. I mean, I think that's an important observation that you're making, because it's like, a lot of rock musicians and blues musicians will say, whatever you want to call that. You might call that like a Chuck Berry lick or a B.B. King lick, or maybe a lick that you first heard that in the song. And, originally going back to the, swing era of jazz, and then in later bebop and post-bop genres and time periods, it was the same thing. They're like, the honeysuckle rose lick or something like that. It was something that Charlie Parker would play. Oh, this is that bird lick or whatever. And it's the same exact thing. So unfortunately, I think over time that has been lost to a certain degree by associating a particular lick or a line in street terms, not putting a theoretical label on it, but just saying, oh yeah, it's the lick.
What about things like, say, 2-5-1 changes, which you encounter in whatever 80% of every jazz standard? Are there ways to develop a vocabulary of lines or phrases that you can pull out in a 2-5-1?
Right, absolutely. I was actually just making myself chuckle there because I said the lick, and if you know that famous YouTube video, there's the lick. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but somebody did a mashup of like the hundreds of songs that feature that line, and that's an example of a phrase, right? So how do you integrate that into 2-5 and into your playing? Well, I think there's two ways of going about it. One way is the guitaristic approach, meaning let's learn that using a different fingering. So I'm going to explore the lick for a second. If this is my one fingering, Well, how about putting that on a different string set? Because due to the tuning of the guitar, that's going to be fingered or look a little different in terms of the shape. So let's say, I'm going to start on an F sharp, and right away, that's forcing you to analyze what's going on. It's not just a fingering or a lick that you would do without thinking about it. You have to sit there and say, hey, that's an F sharp, and then the next note is a G. So where would I play that on the G string? Oh, here. And then the next note is going to be a half step up above. So even doing that guitaristic exercise forces you to think about the musical content, right? You got to know where the notes are. Oh, that's not right. No, that's not right. Ah, there it is. Okay. So now, but it's a completely different fingering and different shape. So you're learning a lot just by doing that very simple exercise. So that's the guitaristic side. The other side is the musical side. So let's say, all right, if that's in the key of D, then what would that sound like, and what would it look like if we're going to do it in the key of G? So. Or then we can maybe finger that in a different place. Now that whole exercise just took me a few seconds, really, but it's a powerful exercise, both musically and guitaristically, because I'm actually thinking about what's going on in that line, and more importantly, how I can use it in my own playing. So the next time I see this particular chord, I can say, hey, that lick will work over that, and then you'll be able to just drop it in there.
Very good. We have a question. It's coincidentally, we were talking about this just before we went live, which Richard Bishop wants to know, does Sean have any courses for new jazz students? Right?
I think this course would be a great start for new jazz students. This is a great way to kind of get your feet wet. One word that we use a lot in this course is safe. There are a lot of safety nets here, and I think, man, that's important when you're learning how to improvise, because improvising can be scary at first, right? If you're trained in like classical music, or if you've never, if you're worried about playing good notes or bad notes, don't worry about that. Let's figure out ways to take the worry and the stress out of this and just be creative, And a lot of times putting in boundaries can help you be more creative. So if I said to somebody, hey, Richard, just take a solo, just go for it. You'd be like, I don't even know where to begin. But if I said, and I do this with my students a lot, if I impose a limitation, it might be a physical limitation. I might say, take a solo using only 2 fingers. Could be a physical guitar limitation. Take a solo only using the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd frets. Take a solo with musical limitations. Only use the chord tones of D minor 7. That gives you less to play with, and it's like you're not going to start out by learning juggling by trying to juggle 6 balls, right? You're going to just get 1 happening and then 2 happening, so you can get the flow and the mechanics. And that's how we address improv in this course. Is like, let's start with very basic, simple concepts so that you can unlock the creativity and have fun, and then we'll start adding more complexity as we go on.
So another observation while we were watching you present the curriculum is, you hear a lot, when you're learning jazz, learn the melody, learn the tune, learn the basic changes, then learn the melody.
Yeah.
And more often than not, the melody is there's chord tones in there.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So is that a good approach as well? Learn the melody and then add a neighbor tone, add some rhythmic, like embellish the melody, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's a great point, because there are different perspectives on this topic. Mine is very much on the side of, you should learn melodies and learn melodies in different keys and analyze those melodies. Like, what makes the melody, so special? If there's a part of the melody that, really resonates with you, then take a look at that and take a listen to that and say, wow, what is it? Well, how is that particular note of the melody, whether it's a chord tone or not, how is it reacting to the chord change? How is it reacting to the lyric? And this is something that I think singers really pay a lot of attention to, is the lyrical content and the melodic and the embellishments that they use. So, we'll talk a lot about phrasing with singers. If you listen to some of the great singers in the jazz tradition, but this would be the same of any style of music. But, if we're talking about like Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday or Frank Sinatra or Billy Eckstine, Joe Williams, we're talking about people, John Hendricks especially comes to mind with his rhythmic phrasing. But they don't sing, the melody to all the things you are like, da, 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 but yet that's the way the melody is often written in a fake book. So unfortunately, a lot of students of jazz kind of bypass recordings. They don't listen to John Hendricks. They don't listen to Ella Fitzgerald. They don't listen to Frank Sinatra. And they go right to the real book thinking that that's kind of the word written in stone.
Yep.
And it's not that at all. That's just a starting point. That's the blueprint, So, yeah, you can learn a lot by listening to how the melody is phrased by horn players, by singers, and then even, guitar players such as Wes Montgomery. He'll just embellish this melody so that it just opens up. And I mean, listen to Wes Montgomery's recording of Round Midnight on his first organ trio record. That is like a textbook example of how to stay true to the melody, but also embellish it and make it your own. It's amazing.
Great answer. Do you know Tim Lurch, by the way?
Oh, yeah, Tim's a good friend.
Say hey, he's
What's up,
tuned in.
Tim? I'll see you in Lacotter. I'm
There you
looking
go.
forward to it, man.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for tuning in as well. We've got another date with Tim.
Tim, do you like my telly? It's actually not mine, but speaking of telly, this is kind of a cool...
I'm hoping to make it mine, actually. So forget it, Tim, if you got your eyes on it.
It's like Tim's already sending me an email. Oh, where'd you get that telly?
Jeff Miller wants to know if you have any courses that cover using octaves like Wes. Did you cover that in the pentatonics course, I think?
Actually in the Views of the Blues course, I
that's
think
right.
you would be interested in checking out. I have a course that we did a little while back called Views of the Blues, and it's essentially a deep dive into the playing styles of Kenny Burrell, Wes Montgomery, and Grant Green. And we start off with Charlie Christian because he served as the primary influence for those three guitar players as well as virtually everybody else. But yeah, when the section in that course on Wes Montgomery is chock full of octaves and block chords.
Yeah, Tommy, if one of the guys can show the the full catalog of the 8 existing courses, you'll see we have fingerstyle jazz is a big topic. In fact, we're going to cover a little bit of that now with the new course. But jazz, blues, and boogaloos was awesome. You did a trading solos, jazz standards, views of the blues that you just talked about. Pentatonic palettes for jazz guitar, I thought was a great way for blues players to start, jazzing up their blues.
Yeah.
Creative jazz comping, walking bass and comping for jazz guitar, and your first course, Fingerstyle Jazz Survival Guide.
Yeah.
So we'll if you go look Sean up, you can have a look at that whole catalog. And
yeah, every single one of those courses features a lot of blues in it because, number one, blues is such an important part of jazz. They're inseparable. But also because blues occupies a special place in all of our hearts, right? Most guitar players, we kind of start off learning blues or something directly connected to the blues.
So don't forget, you've got Sean Live is the promo code, 25% off for the next 48 hours.
Nice.
This is the gratuitous advertising
It's
section.
beautiful.
I know. I don't make you do it. I do it for you.
I love that
okay?
word, gratuitous. It's
Yeah,
just
why not?
wonderful.
But you can use that on any or all of the existing courses, or you can pre-order either of the courses we're talking about today. The trivia question, one more time for you. Today's trivia question is, what influential jazz pianist and composer served as the inspiration for Sean's third acclaimed solo guitar recording? Click that link. Don't answer it in the chat, please. If you answer it correctly, you'll be one of the folks that we randomly select from and award one person a $100 TrueFire gift card.
I'll say that particular recording, also known as the recording that gave Sean tendinitis.
I'll bet, man. No doubt. Another question for you. This one's from Chuck. I think Chuck Steak, I believe.
Hey, Chuck.
When does your musical intuition tell you to switch between chord tones, scales, and theory, and just winging it based on key or neck position? Like, once you get a grip on these tools, what's happening up there, really?
Yeah, that's a great and deep question. I think in my mind, the short answer to that is like anything that you learn how to do. The common analogies are riding a bike, driving a car. learning how to skateboard, anything that involves physicality, but also involves some thinking. And I think, if you think about all of those examples, there was a time where you had to really be, cognitive about that. Okay, here is, this is what this ignition does, and you're starting the car, and then the steering wheel is for turning. And I mean, this might be a gross oversimplification of it, but you get the idea. And then you get to a point where you understand what all the controls of the car do, how they function, how to be, in control of the car. And I think in control is the key word, because once you're in control of the car, then you feel confident driving it. And it's kind of the same idea. It's like, okay, yeah, we have to learn the names of the notes. We have to understand these basic mechanics. But once you get the hang of it, and it's sooner than a lot of people think, then you're driving the car. Now you drive a car, or you ride a bike, or you do whatever without thinking about it, But I don't know how to skateboard, so if I was going to learn how to do that, I would want to think about the mechanics and the moves and the language, and maybe I would have a friend that would show me, oh, hey, you're leaning too forward, or your weight's too much on the back, try moving your feet a little bit. So, there's all of those tips initially in your development, but eventually you forget all that stuff, and musical intuition takes over. And I think even as you advance to higher levels, a lot of that is the comfort of knowing a tune. I think knowing the song by heart will really give you that sense of confidence to be like, I don't need to worry about what change it is. I'm not even thinking about that anymore. I'm just playing music.
So I have to read you this comment, because it's exactly what we've been talking about. Asunto de Guitarrista says, my solos sound like arpeggios and scales up and down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, straight up, right? You must hear that a million times.
All the
we
time.
hear it a million times.
Right.
And there's, this course is not saying that you shouldn't know your scales and arpeggios, but this course, from our perspective on that side of the glass, kind of gives you the freedom to get away from those scales and arpeggios and think in this more organic fashion. I mean, this is a great, if that's what you're suffering from, okay, this
Check this
is
course.
the cure.
This is the course for you.
This is the course for you.
Yeah,
okay.
that's a valid point.
It is, and the point I'm making is he's not alone.
Right.
I mean,
No.
this is. So you need to write a passage out of there, and this very well may be
Yeah,
that
of course you know scales, and everybody knows scales, and it's good to know those, but don't be restricted by them. And that's the whole idea is creating music, which ultimately leads to communicating. You and I are having a conversation right now. I don't know about my grammar, but if we were going to analyze everything, I'm not thinking in my mind, okay, subject, clause, noun, okay,
Right.
pronoun,
Period.
I need to put that in there.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of improvising musicians think about that. Oh, now I'm going to put in the pronoun. Oh, wait a minute. Did I, what's the sentence structure,
Right.
I just want to communicate an idea with you
Right.
naturally and organically, to keep going back to that word, but that's a word that really resonates with me.
It's the perfect word for this course. Okay, let's do some fingerstyle jazz.
All right,
so
let's
the
do it.
second course Sean presented this week is an essentials fingerstyle jazz. I believe there's 10 tunes. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 etudes, 10 full-length etudes, all solo guitar. And I'm going to pull this. You probably want me to play some pieces directly from the course, so I'm going to pull this up. But in this one course, we explore different styles. So how to play ballads, how to play rubato, free of time, how to play in time, and both variations. How to play blues. There's a lot in this course that covers walking bass lines and comping for jazz guitar, so we definitely nail that. How to play in tempo, and there's also a lot of discussion and lessons that talk about arranging. How do we arrange a chord melody? How do we take a melody of a song that we know and love and create an entire piece that would work for guitar? And for me, that's one of my favorite aspects of the guitar, is that, like the piano, we can play all of the parts to create, a complete musical statement. We can play the bass and bass lines. We can outline the harmony with chord voicings, and we can also play melodies. and solo lines and every aspect of music is there at our fingertips, literally.
So so we have 10 full-length etudes.
Yeah.
And this is great for the student that kind of has their fingerstyle jazz thing up and running, right? And this expands, off of the fingerstyle jazz survival guide,
Very much
the
so.
walking bass lines. So you can almost think of this as a repertoire course on the one hand. On the other hand, every tune is first performed and then broken down. So, that's all about digging in, finding the sections or the techniques that you want to work on and pulling that out, or learning the whole tune, which fingerstyle players love, expanding repertoire, learning the entire tune, don't they?
Of course. I mean, and there's so many benefits to playing fingerstyle and solo guitar in general. Benefits from just having a deeper understanding of your instrument and a deeper understanding of harmony and melody and, music. But also there's a practical application that you can do a gig by yourself,
Yeah.
there are a lot of places where you can't bring in the whole band. I mean, you all know what I'm talking about, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But this will give you the tools and the techniques to go get a gig and play solo. It might be for your own enjoyment, it might be for money, and definitely playing in a duo situation where there may or may not be a bass player involved. So this will give you the tools and the chops to play with a singer, to play with a horn player. So anytime you need to, do a gig, or even if the drummer doesn't show up, you're cool. You can handle the gig.
So let's perform. How about Blues Three Ways?
Sure.
Wanna do that?
Yeah. And as you mentioned, this is definitely a repertoire course. I would recommend, if fingerstyle jazz is new to you, to definitely check out the Fingerstyle Jazz Guitar Survival Guide and a course that we recently did called Fingerstyle Jazz Handbook. Both of those courses are chock full of technical exercises. For example, if you've never played fingerstyle before, you're only used to playing with a pick, those will give you a ton of examples to get the hands warmed up. This course has a few of those, but it is essentially, like you said, a repertoire course. So this particular tune, Blues Three Ways, what we're doing is playing a 12-bar blues progression using jazz chord changes in 3 different keys. And it graduates from a single walking bass line, and then adding some chord comps in there, chord jabs, and this is all explored in great detail in my walking bass and comping for jazz guitar course, which is the second course I did with TrueFire, and that's like the deep dive in this style. And then by the time we get to the third chorus of blues, we're playing full, 4 and 5 note voicings. We're adding syncopations. We're, doing all this stuff to make it sound like music. So here's a little excerpt of this tune. 1, 2, 3, and...
So nice, man. I love that one. I really love that one.
Thank you. Yeah.
So in the course, Sean will break it down, step you through the whole thing, teach you all the kind of sticky parts.
Yeah.
But let's play another tune.
Sure.
Okay. How about Mrs. Jones?
All right, Mrs. Jones. This is a tune. This etude is based on the changes to Heavy Met Miss Jones. In the course, we're calling it Heavy Met Colorado. And this is more of an example of playing a song for solo guitar, playing solo guitar and integrating and bringing together solo lines and chords. A lot of times, guitar players think, well, if I'm playing solo guitar, I'm only going to play chords and a walking bass line or only lines, and how do I bring those two together? So this is a little example of that. So let's see here. Something like that.
Very, very nice.
I forgot the etude, so I just started improvising at one point.
Oh,
but
no improvising here, Sean. Okay. What do you think this is, a jazz
Wait
thing?
a minute. Okay.
I wanted to also mention we have a trivia winner, Mellow Tone. Congratulations.
All right, Mellow Tone.
And why don't you tell us the correct answer?
The answer is Thelonious Monk.
Yeah.
Sphere. Yeah, so that was a really fun project. I've loved for many, many years the music of Thelonious Monk. His compositions, his approach to music, as well as his piano playing, of course. But just the overall vibe is just so unique and so spectacular. His rhythm, his sound, everything. So I've noticed over the years, a lot of guitar players, many guitar players are also drawn to his music. And many guitar players have recorded his music as well. Great guitar players, Bobby Broom, Peter Bernstein. And so I think this was around 2011. I thought, wow, actually was many years before that, but I started recording it in 2011. And I thought it'd be really fun to play some of his music and arrange it for solo guitar.
And it was challenging for you, huh?
Yeah, very challenging. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the tunes?
Oh, it's been a while actually. I think, for me, I've like, I play something and get so deeply enmeshed or immersed in that thing, and then after that, I kind of have to leave it and then never come back to it again.
Makes sense.
Maybe once in a while, but yeah. But I would mention that I have a book that Hal Leonard published that's called Fingerstyle Jazz Guitar Solos. It's on Amazon. It's on a lot of bookstores. You can get it online. But that book is a wonderful collection of transcriptions from my recordings, and there's tunes from My Fair Lady on there. There's tunes from the Monk album. So if you're really ever interested in learning note for note transcriptions of these, which apparently I need to go back and learn, they're in that book, Fingerstyle Jazz Guitar Solos.
Great. And we just showed on the screen the album. which is an incredible album. I love listening to it.
Oh, thank you.
And they're showing the books, man. They are on the case back there.
Yeah, nice. All
Good
right,
job.
go team.
Thank you, team.
And I have to give a shout out real quick to my wife, Andrea, who's an amazing artist and printmaker, and she did all of the prints. She does all the artwork for my CDs, but she did the artwork on the Monk album, which is just outstanding. And the cover of that is a linoleum print, which is intense, just cutting to make it look like the image of his face, his profile. But when they do those, she does it backwards, so she's basically doing everything in reverse for the linoleum cut.
Incredible.
So that was a really cool
That's
project
wild.
to collaborate on.
While we're kind of talking about some of the housekeeping things, there is a thumbs up underneath the video. And you've gotten a lot of people to give you that thumbs up. And I have to ask you guys to show your love, share the love, spread the love for Sean and all the work he's doing and all the great information he brings to all of us. Just move your little cursor over to that thumbs up. I see you guys doing it even as I'm speaking right now. Click that thumbs up. And I know both Sean and everyone here at TrueFire will appreciate that. And will one of you, just one of you, all I need is one thumbs up for the team behind the glass, Tommy, Seth, Frank, Doug, all the folks you don't see that
all
are
my
making this
thumbs up
happen.
in the air.
Zach's moderating, Allie is moderating. There's a whole team here doing their thing. And we love doing this. This is one of the things we really, really love.
You're the best team in the world.
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's so true.
Let's do. You want to do one more tune from the course?
Sure.
So we'll play a third one, but there are 10 of them here, all of them with a little bit of a setup, a full performance, everything tabbed, everything notated. Of course, with TrueFire, you sync, the tab is synced to the video. You can slow it down. You can loop any section, a measure, 4 sections. We even give you a fretboard display, so we make it, as easy as possible to learn the material. And then, of course, Sean breaks it down in detail for you as well. How about
Want to do a ballad, Autumn in New York?
Well, you pick whatever you want to
I
play.
like that. And I just wanted to just very briefly expand on what you were saying, because this is such an important learning tool. One of the things that I learned through studying the masters, such as Joe Pass, Tuck Andrus, Lenny Breau, as well as many piano players such as Oscar Peterson and Thelonious Monk, is you're looking at a chord symbol that you would see in a real book or a lead sheet, and it would say, G minor 7, C7, F major 7. And what I would play for those chord voicing didn't sound anything like I heard on the recordings, and so one of the great advantages of studying a course like this in depth is that you can see, hey, the chord symbol says D7, but there are so many different ways to create a voicing for that chord. So I think exploring through these transcriptions, of course, Joe Pass has a lot of books available, and many people have studied those. But a video course like this gives you all the notes on the page, but also a breakdown of the concept, so you have a chance to explore, what is this person thinking? So let me just give you a little idea of how to maybe one way to approach a ballad. This is called Autumn in New England, and this is based on the beautiful song Autumn in New York. And it goes on from there. But what many of these arrangements serve as a blueprint. We can say, okay, here are the notes, but then you can take it a step further, and there's lots of different ways to articulate that. You know, maybe you want to arpeggiate the chord, maybe you just want to do block chords with your thumb. So we get into that in great detail in this course. So even though it is a repertoire course, there's a lot of instruction into how to bring these to life by physically playing them and physically articulating them on the guitar. And what I mentioned earlier about chord voicings, there's a perfect example right here in the second measure. The chord change is C7. However, I'm playing this chord, followed by this chord. And those are two chord voicings that most people might not think to play when they think of a C7 chord. And the point of this course is to illustrate harmonic possibilities that are all centered around the melody first, how to harmonize a melody in a way that makes sense, in a way that connects the chords together, in a way that you know, creates a little inventiveness and ingenuity when it comes to playing these tunes.
Yeah, and you do a really good job of that in all of the courses. I mean, we find that, you know, the kind of different strokes for different folks with respect to TrueFire students. And some do like just learning the repertoire, and some work with the material just to find the key learnings and approaches in the breakdowns, you know. It's just like, you know, I don't know, when you were learning guitar, did you have tab notation, slow it down with that? Did you have those tools?
No, none of those tools. I had at one point an Ibanez Rockin' Play, which was a little cassette recorder. That this was a huge revelation for me because you could slow it down to half speed, but then everything dropped by 1 octave or 2 octaves. So when you're listening, you're just
right. Yeah. So, you know, when you think about all of the tools, you know, thanks to technology, that, you know, you can slow it down, you can loop it, you have tab, you have standard notation. But at the end of the day, watching you play it and talk about it is, you know, the other tools become reference, really, kind of get you in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But the real learning is in the video, you know?
Yeah, and it's invaluable. And for me, I mean, growing up in a rural area, I'm from a rural spot in Maine, you know, and in the 80s in Maine, I couldn't go see anybody like this. I mean, I remember years later when I finally saw Joe Pass in concert, it was like a revelation. And then years after that, with YouTube, then I saw those videos of Wes. And after listening to Wes Montgomery for many years, and then all of a sudden being able to see him play,
I know,
was, you know, revelatory. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
I know, it
and,
is.
you know, he looked exactly like I thought he would look, which is just effortless, having
yeah.
a good time, beautiful.
Yeah. You know, it's one of the examples we give all the time is I wish I had a Wes Montgomery TrueFire course, you know, when I was coming up, right? To really see his music and his playing through his eyes and ears, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things that we do in these courses is like, yes, it's all laid out there on the table for you, but at the same time, we really invite the students to say, okay, now here are some ideas for you to do. You know, I joke and I call it optional homework, but here is the next step. And this is kind of on you. And this is a wonderful thing to be able to explore these concepts on your own terms.
One quick question, and then we've got to tell folks about these two guitars. Okay. Yes, we'll tell them about my guitar, or soon to be my guitar, or I hope. Daily piano. I think this is a great question. First of all, it says great instructor in courses. He loves you. I totally love your fingerstyle courses. May I ask if playing fingerstyle only, whether it's jazz, blues, or rock, is something that's realistic, a realistic approach, or is learning to play with a pick mandatory? Like, you know, like you do both, right?
Yeah.
How would you answer that?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think not to dodge the question, but ultimately that answer will be, you know, on you. It will be up to you to answer that. I think that we could look at, in all genres of music, many great fingerstyle players. I'm thinking of like Mark Knopfler in rock, you know, Dire Straits. Hubert Sumlin played with his fingers. Tommy Emmanuel plays with his fingers, but of course he's a solo artist. But there have been many, I mean, I've seen John Mayer play just with his fingers and playing, I saw him play with Buddy Guy, and both of them really use their fingers. Jeff Beck. So, I mean, I think there are many examples of, yeah, you can just play fingerstyle. For me, it's I don't have nails, by the way. A lot of people ask me, "Do you have nails?" And that's another personal choice. I don't have any nails at all, and so for me, I like the feeling of just flesh, and I like the sound. However, I'm very much tied to the amplifier in getting the sound and volume. I don't have any volume without nails. For me personally, when I'm playing in a duo situation with a singer or a horn player or a bassist, I feel a lot more comfortable using my fingers because it allows me to tap into different textures more naturally than using a pick. Anytime I pretty much play with a drummer and I want the sound of a pick or the intensity of a pick, then I've learned to play with a pick and I use the pick. But I mean, I think that you can play fingerstyle in any genre of music.
So, basically you're saying, why not try to learn both?
Yeah, I
right?
think it's good to learn them all, I mean, a lot of other instruments, I don't think it has to be an either or type of thing. A lot of other instruments have lots of different techniques that they use to play that instrument in different ways. And so for me, it's just like a palette thing. It's like a color. I play with my fingers, and that will invite certain, attributes of my playing that I wouldn't be able to, get with a pick, and vice versa. So when I play with a pick versus fingerstyle, those both act as kind of conduits for very different styles of playing. If I'm playing funk, of course I'm going to do that with a pick.
Yep. Gear, ready?
Gear,
Let's start,
let's do
since you
it.
just mentioned the amp, can we start with those great amps over
Yeah,
there?
let's check a look.
Tommy, can you get a shot of those?
All right, so
First of all, they're beautiful. They're compact. Do you travel with those?
oh yeah, all the time. So okay, so you can see, you can see in the shot there's the microphone. This is just a regular Shure mic. Here's my hand. So there's a good scale representation of how small these are. It's sitting next to a Fender Princeton, and Princeton reverbs are small amps, and this is less than half the size of a Princeton reverb. So but I think first and foremost, it's the sound of these things that's amazing.
The sound is incredible.
It's incredible. It's really rich. For me, it's the first solid state portable amp that I ever encountered in my life that sounds good.
Now it's stacked on top of what?
This is a little extension cabinet, also made by Hendrickson, and so the amp is called the Blue, BLU, and it's a single channel amp with Bluetooth features and a lot of really cool features. And then it's sitting on top of their line array extension cabinet that they call the Ray. So this is my stack. This is my half stack. And the Ray actually has 4 little 3.5-inch speakers and then a tweeter in the middle that's defeatable if you want. So for me, by utilizing that extension speaker, it opens up the sound, and it really spreads the sound out in the same way that a piano would, or a horn even. The guitar, whether you're talking about classical guitar or even electric guitar, Archtop guitars, they're all the quietest instrument in any, every style of guitar playing has had to deal with this. Bluegrass guitar players, they're constantly working on volume with a dread because they're overtaken by fiddles and banjo. Every setting you have to deal with the inherent limitations of the guitar, volume-wise.
Well, it has so many of the features so many of us look for. First of all, it's very cool looking.
Yep.
I love how the logo is lit up, right?
Yep,
It's got the
it's on.
Bluetooth. You know that it's on.
Yeah.
That's more important than you would think, okay?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's compact, easy to travel with.
I fly with it on planes. You can actually put it on the seat.
Yeah.
You can take it on with you.
The sound, though, the tone is remarkable.
Yeah, and a lot of people use these in the studio. They have XLR outs, and whether you're running into a PA system on a gig or in the studio, they're just amazing amps. And just by coincidence, I learned about these amps when I lived in LA, but now I live in Denver, Colorado, where these are made. So over the years, I've become very good friends with Peter Hendrickson and the entire Hendrickson team. And they're great folks. They believe in music. They're just awesome to work with and awesome to know. So now they're all like family to me, those guys.
Well, we would love for you to make an introduction. I feel like conspicuous by their absence here in TrueFire Studios, we need to get some Hendrickson in here, just based on the sonic qualities alone. But they also look very cool.
Yeah, everybody's using them now. I mean, if you look at players in New York and in LA, and I mean, and not just jazz players, but acoustic players as well. They're really gaining traction with singer-songwriters, acoustic fingerstyle guitarists, studio players, not only because of their portability, but because they sound so great.
They're great. And the guys just put up on the screen the website. So you could head over there, check it out in more detail. But, you know, definitely something worth looking at. I mean, even if you were grabbing it to go jam with your buds.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of times people will ask me, they're kind of skeptical and say, well, it's so small, how loud does it get, or how many watts? And I think the wattage rating is 120 watts, but just take my word for it, it's loud enough. I play organ trio gigs with loud drummers and like a full-sized B3 and Leslie with this little guy. It's hilarious. Actually, there's videos of it on their website. And this amp can hang in that situation.
That's killer.
I mean, it's amazing.
So make that introduction if you would, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so now tell us about the guitar you're playing.
The guitar that I'm playing right now that I used in this fingerstyle course is a relatively brand new type of guitar. It's built by master luthier Bill Cummins, who's been around for a long time, and he's based in Philadelphia. Very high-end, beautiful, hand-built archtop guitars. And he, like many luthiers, have always felt, I think, obligated to offer a guitar to meet the needs of the working musician or the student guitar player, or anybody that didn't have a lot of money to invest in an instrument, particularly if they're traveling and playing a lot in bars and clubs and all of that. So he recently developed this series. It's called the GCS series for Guitar Craft series. And this guitar and this whole series is made in South Korea, small shop of highly trained luthiers, and then they're basically assembled there and then sent to Bill in Philadelphia, and then Bill finishes these guitars in his shop. So the setup, the finish, the attention to detail on these instruments, the retail price is right around $2,000, which is an amazing bargain for an archtop.
Which
guitar
model
of this
is that?
quality.
The GCS?
This is the GCS 16-1, so it's one pickup.
Yep.
They have models with two pickups, and they have kind of a thin line model, like more of like a semi-hollow body type of a 335 vibe. They all sound killer. He's got a new model that is kind of more of a rockabilly sounding and looking guitar with a Bigsby and a different pickup. Yep. But yeah, his attention to detail. I mean, it's a laminate guitar, but it's laminated spruce and maple back and sides. Really cool use of some alternative materials. This is a material called Rich Light. It looks like ebony, but this is actually made from paper, recycled, so it's actually it's a green guitar. But, again, first and foremost, it sounds great, it plays great, all of these guitars are set up. So this is an awesome guitar. I can't recommend it highly enough. For anybody that maybe just wants to check out an archtop, or students, or anybody, whether you're on a budget or not, it doesn't matter. This guitar will hold up to guitars much more costly. So yeah, this is a Bill Cummins.
Great job. We showed that on the screen as well.
Yeah.
Go to their website. You can learn more there. But you see all the archtops we have hermetically sealed in glass that are thousands of dollars. I can tell you we all played that guitar. It's very, very impressive. And whether or not you just want to get an archtop in the collection, I think that's a great gigging guitar,
Absolutely.
great traveling guitar, and a great playing guitar. All right, show them my guitar now.
All right. Wait, where did it go? It's already gone.
Oh, no. Go
Brad's
ahead
henchman
in
took it
there
off. All right,
and
let's check out this
help him
guitar.
get the guitar.
Give you a hand.
Yeah. So, thanks, man. So this guitar I used for the organic improv course, and this guitar is made by a friend of mine in Colorado. He lives in the Colorado Springs area. His name is Kelly Meyer, and his guitar company is called Monterrey Guitars. And it's basically a combination of Montana and Colorado. I think either Kelly or his wife is from Montana. Colorado put them together, Monterrey. He builds cool guitars, really. Every single one, I mean, it's true, like every single one is unique and different. He's built guitars for Zane Carney and Vince Gill has one of his guitars. But this is actually his viola model. You can't feel it by looking at it, but this thing weighs, I think, just under 4 pounds. I mean, it's ridiculously light. It's the lightest guitar I've ever played that's in this style. It's completely hollow, but there are tone blocks in it, and it looks like a telly, but it's actually an archtop. So that's kind of the premise behind his viola model, is that he borrows the aesthetics and the building traditions from violin and viola luthiers. So it's a carved archtop, you can see kind of there, hollow, and it's beautiful wood. I mean, this is maple, sugar maple, back and sides and neck, and then the top is an Engelmann spruce. So it has shares a lot of the qualities of an archtop guitar. It actually has a floating mini humbucker, which is kind of cool. It's like a Johnny Smith vibe on a telly, and then a humbucker back here. And what's cool about this instrument, I'll just show you real quick, is that, I mean, it sounds great. It weighs nothing, so it's obviously a wonderful travel guitar, but you can get telly sounds out of it. So it's a pretty versatile instrument. Just check this out real quick. We can get a nice fat jazz tone, which is what we do obviously throughout this course. So, but it has this clarity to it, so you can really hear. You can hear each of those individual notes. But if you want to get a little bit of a in between, you know, kind of a telly sound. So it has that sound available as well as just the bridge pickup. And there's just cool little attention to detail. Here's a half, you know, the saddle's broken in half. Here's brass on this side and a tusk ivory. So it's a really cool guitar. Kelly's a great builder, and I'm very privileged to call a lot of luthiers very good friends, because over the years I've been going to guitar shows and guitar festivals and demoing these guitars for the builders. So over the years I've become friends with many of them, and they're all great people. They're just, the luthiers are so committed to music, and I just love giving them a shout out, because believe me, they're not in it for the money. And they're really, that's right. So there's a shared common ground there. And yeah, so he's a great builder, and you know, there's a couple of great shows coming up. The Artisan Guitar Show in Harrisburg in April. I'll be there performing and teaching, as well as the LaConner Show in LaConner, Washington in May. And I just have to give a quick shout out also to the folks at Grace Design in Lyons, Colorado, which makes real high-end preamps. And I'm using the Bix right now. And it's just kind of like a little preamp. I don't need to use a preamplifier, but I really like it in situations where I don't maybe have an amp and I just need to go direct into the PA. But I even use it as just kind of like a little buffer and just a nice little polish to the sound. By always putting it on the front end. So
very nice.
I'm a minimalist, but I always like to have a little preamp and just a little touch of reverb if I can.
Yeah, they've got a nice screenshot of that up as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Just show them the back of that guitar too.
Okay, so check this out. So here, let me see, just unhook this here. You can see the figure in this sugar maple, back and sides, and then the neck.
And then the little signature F-hole thing.
And this is one of his signatures. Yeah, that's just kind of painted on there.
It's a beautiful guitar. I mean, I think the video really does do it justice, but man, when you put that on, first of all, it plays beautifully.
Like butter.
You know?
Yeah.
And
everybody loves a telly, you know?
Absolutely.
And it's really one of the most versatile guitars, and you could use a guitar like this for any style of music.
Thank you for taking us through the gear. We've run over, but everyone's hung tough. Everyone dug it. Thank you guys
everybody.
for all the thumbs up. That means you have no idea how much we appreciate that, and I know I speak for Sean as well.
Definitely.
Thank you for tuning in today, and you know, we'll see you next time. And Sean, if you wouldn't mind playing us out, maybe West Paris? Or whatever you want to play.
Yeah, no, that
Your
sounds
call.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, let's play out to that.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.